Have you ever felt that, even though you know a relationship is destroying you, it still feels impossible to break free? Here's a painful truth. You're not trapped by the person, but by the illusion you've created about them. Until you identify and break the unconscious ties that keep you in this cycle, you'll keep returning to the same pain, repeating the same patterns without even realizing it. Carl Gustav Jung dedicated his life to understanding why this happens, and more importantly, how we can break free from this emotional prison. In this video, I'm going to reveal everything he discovered about emotional dependency and show you the exact path to break this cycle once and for all. By the end, you won't just understand, you'll feel the weight of that relationship lifting off you. You've probably asked yourself why it's so hard to emotionally detach from someone, why you feel stuck, like there's an invisible thread tying you to them. Jung gives us a clear answer. It's not the person themselves that traps us, but what we project onto them. Emotional attachment often has little to do with genuine love and everything to do with what we believe that person represents to us. In relationships, we project our needs, insecurities, and even unknown parts of ourselves onto others. Without realizing it, we assign them the role of filling voids we don't know how to handle alone. This projection can create a bond so strong that, even when the relationship becomes painful, we struggle to let go. The issue is that this need for connection often stems from an internal imbalance. Jung explained that when someone hasn't fully developed their own identity, they tend to look outside for what's missing inside. That's where emotional dependency begins. If we pay close attention, we'll notice that the feeling of intense attachment is usually tied to something we think we'll lose by walking away. Maybe a sense of security, validation, companionship, or an ideal of love we've projected onto them. But what if all of that was already within us? Attachment is not love. Healthy love doesn't hurt, doesn't suffocate, and doesn't make us feel like hostages. What hurts is the illusion of loss, the idea that without the other person, we're incomplete. But the truth is, we're already whole. We just weren't taught to see it. If we want to free ourselves, we first need to understand what exactly is holding us back. That's the first step toward true emotional detachment, and for that, we need to go beyond the surface and look inward. We don't always understand why we feel so deeply tied to someone, even when we know the relationship hurts us. Sometimes it feels like we're reliving a cycle we've experienced before, as if we're stuck in an inevitable loop. That pattern isn't random, it has deep roots in our psyche, shaped by what Jung called emotional complexes. Jung described complexes as clusters of emotional energy in the unconscious, formed by past experiences. These complexes act like invisible filters, shaping how we perceive the world and behave in relationships. Often our attachment to someone isn't really about them, but about an echo of the past we carry inside. If you've ever felt like you always end up in similar relationships, facing the same conflicts over and over, chances are a complex is at play. The abandonment complex, for example, can cause someone to cling desperately to another, afraid of being left, even when the relationship is destructive. The rejection complex can push us to seek approval from people who never truly value us, because deep down we're trying to fix an old wound. These complexes are like emotional magnets. They pull us toward people and situations that reinforce the beliefs we hold about ourselves. If at some point in life we internalized the belief that we're unworthy of love, we may subconsciously seek relationships that confirm exactly that. The biggest danger of these complexes is that they operate outside our awareness. Until we recognize them, we'll keep acting according to their script, unaware that we're trapped in an illusion, But here's the good news: complexes aren't life sentences. They can be identified and dissolved. The key is self-awareness. Every time an intense emotion surfaces in a relationship, fear, anxiety, insecurity, or a desperate need for the other person, pause and ask yourself, is this emotion really about the situation, or am I reacting to something much older? When we realize these patterns are just echoes from the past, we begin to regain control. And with that, something powerful happens. We start choosing our relationships with clarity instead of being pulled into them by unconscious impulses. But we don't always recognize that within us are aspects we reject and prefer not to see. Jung called this hidden part the shadow, everything we don't accept in ourselves, but that inevitably shows up in our lives. The shadow holds repressed emotions, insecurities, unexpressed desires, and traits we've learned to deny early on. And it's precisely this invisible part of us that we unconsciously project onto others. When we feel an intense attachment to someone, it's often not about the person themselves, but about what they represent to us. We project onto them qualities we believe we lack, or we see in them something we desperately wish we had. That explains why some people have such a powerful emotional grip on us. They carry, unknowingly, pieces of ourselves that we haven't accepted or developed. Likewise, the things that irritate or hurt us the most in someone else often reflect something we're denying in ourselves. If we feel a strong need to control the relationship, maybe it's because we're afraid to face our own vulnerability. If the other person's behavior makes us feel insecure, maybe it's because our self-confidence is shaky. When we recognize these projections, we start to see that the issue was never really about the other person. It was always about us. The shadow works subtly, and one of the clearest signs of its presence is the emotional intensity we feel towards someone. The stronger the connection, the more likely it is that this person is reflecting something we need to acknowledge. If the attachment feels overwhelming, if we believe that person is essential to our happiness, it may be a sign that parts of ourselves are trapped in that relationship. Liberation comes when we bring the shadow into consciousness. We need to ask ourselves, what does this person represent to me? What do I admire in them that I believe I don't have? What hurts me the most in this relationship, and how might that reflect something within me? When we face these answers, we realize we don't need the other person to feel whole. Everything we're looking for is already within us, waiting to be seen. Becoming aware of the shadow doesn't mean distancing ourselves from everyone or avoiding deep connections. It means we stop looking outside for what can only be found within. It means we learn to relate without dependency, without idealizations, and without the fear of losing something that in reality was always ours to begin with. Once we understand that, we start to see love differently, not as a prison, but as a space of freedom. Love is often idealized as an absolute feeling, an irresistible force that justifies any sacrifice. From an early age, we're taught that loving means giving ourselves entirely to the other person, that real connection comes with pain, jealousy, and even suffering. But what if that view is wrong? What if, instead of love, we're just caught in an unconscious pattern of attachment? There's a fine line between a healthy relationship and one based on dependency. What many people call love is actually fear disguised as affection, fear of loneliness, fear of not being enough, fear of losing a part of themselves with the other person. When we believe someone completes us, we start acting as if without them we're just empty halves. But that's one of the greatest illusions created by our unconscious. Jung reminds us that true love doesn't imprison. It doesn't come from lack but from wholeness. A relationship can only be truly healthy when both people feel whole without needing the other to exist. However, when there's an inner void, it's common to project onto the other person the responsibility for our happiness, and that's the beginning of emotional captivity. Dependency arises when the relationship becomes a shield against the fear of facing ourselves. The person stays not out of choice but out of need, often even when the relationship turns toxic with pain, insecurity, and emotional exhaustion. The idea of leaving feels unbearable because the bond isn't built on genuine love, but on a need for validation. The most dangerous part of this emotional prison is that it often goes unnoticed. We convince ourselves that this is just how love is. We ignore the signs and become dependent on crumbs of attention and affection. The longer we stay in this dynamic, the harder it becomes to break free. True emotional freedom begins when we understand that we don't need someone else to feel complete. Love should not be a refuge for our insecurities or a bandage for old wounds. It should be a choice, not a necessity. And for that to happen, we need to learn how to build that sense of wholeness within ourselves. Because only when we are whole can we love without chains, without fear, and without the illusion that our happiness lies in someone else's hands. Many people spend their lives searching in others for what they haven't found within. We create the illusion that if we find someone who loves us enough, we'll finally feel complete. But this endless search for external fulfillment only distances us from an essential process for true emotional freedom: individuation. Jung described individuation as the path to becoming who we truly are, without relying on external validation. It's a journey of deep self-knowledge where we learn to integrate all parts of our psyche, including the ones we avoid, fear, or don't even know exist. When we neglect this journey, we become vulnerable to relationships that reinforce our sense of lack, because without realizing it, we're looking for pieces of ourselves in others. Emotional dependency arises when we haven't completed this process. When we don't truly know ourselves, we tend to project onto others what we feel is missing in us. This leads to idealizing partners, creating unrealistic expectations, and, inevitably, suffering when we realize that no one can give us what can only be found within. The first step to emotional freedom is taking responsibility for our own well-being. Often, we hand over the job of making us happy to others as if our personal fulfillment were someone else's responsibility. But this is a dangerous trap. It puts us in a vulnerable position where our peace depends on someone else's behavior. Individuation teaches us that we are responsible for filling our own voids. This doesn't mean shutting ourselves off from love or relationships, but that we engage with others from a place of choice, not need. A healthy relationship happens between two whole individuals, not between two halves trying to complete each other. This process takes courage. Facing ourselves can be uncomfortable because it means confronting our pain, our weaknesses, and everything we've avoided. But it's in that confrontation that true transformation happens. When we learn to find satisfaction in our own company, when we develop a solid sense of identity, emotional attachment loses its grip, not because we stop loving, but because we start loving consciously, without cages and without fear. As we become more authentic and let go of the illusion that we need someone else to be happy, we begin to realize that true fulfillment was never outside. It was always within us, waiting to be discovered. There's something in Jung's philosophy that's crucial to mention. In our relationships, there are invisible forces acting on a deep level, shaping our choices, expectations, and even the way we become emotionally attached. He identified two of these primal forces in the human unconscious: the animus and the anima. They represent, respectively, the unconscious masculine aspect within women and the unconscious feminine aspect within men. When we're unaware of these energies within us, we end up projecting them onto the people we're in relationships with, creating dependency, idealization, and constant frustration. The anima in men is the archetype of inner femininity, connected to emotion, intuition, and sensitivity. When a man hasn't developed his anima within, he tends to seek women who embody these traits, hoping they'll fill an emotional void he hasn't integrated on his own. The risk here is idealization. He might place his partner on a pedestal, expecting her to bring him the wholeness he hasn't found in himself. When this expectation breaks, frustration and uncontrollable attachment follow. The animus in women is the archetype of inner strength, logic, and action. When a woman hasn't recognized and developed her animus, she may feel insecure making decisions and will seek out men who appear strong, stable, and protective, expecting them to play that role for her. Just like with the anima, this projection can lead to emotional dependency, because the woman feels she needs the other to feel safe and validated in the world. These projections create a false sense of need within the relationship. The partner becomes a symbolic representation of what we feel is missing in ourselves. This dynamic can be intense and addictive because the other person seems to hold the key to our completeness. But inevitably, any projected expectation will lead to disappointment. No one can forever play the role of complementing our psyche. The way out of this cycle is to recognize and integrate these energies within ourselves. A man needs to develop his sensitivity, his connection to emotions, without relying on a woman to do it for him. A woman needs to strengthen her inner confidence and independence without needing a man to feel safe. When that balance happens, the relationship stops being a quest for wholeness and becomes a genuine meeting between two people who already feel whole. But even when we physically distance ourselves from someone, we often still feel their presence in our minds and emotions. We think about them constantly, replay conversations, feel longing, or even anger. This invisible connection may be a sign that energetic ties are still holding us to that relationship, preventing true emotional detachment. Jung teaches us that relationships don't happen only on a conscious level. In the unconscious, we form deep bonds with those we've connected intensely with, and those ties can remain even after a breakup. The stronger the attachment was, the harder it is to fully break free. That's because part of our identity was tied to that person. When the relationship ends, it feels like a piece of us is gone, too. These ties don't need to be physical to affect us. We can go years without seeing someone, but if that energetic bond still exists, that person remains present in our thoughts, influencing our emotions and behavior. This can keep us stuck, creating a sense of emotional stagnation or invisible dependency. The first step to cutting these ties is to recognize they exist. Anytime you notice your thoughts obsessively returning to that person, ask yourself, is this connection still serving me, or am I stuck in an illusion? It's important to understand that holding on to a bond just out of emotional habit might be slowing down your personal growth. A powerful way to break this tie is through conscious visualization. Close your eyes and imagine an energetic cord connecting you to the other person. Observe its color and intensity. Then visualize a bright light gently cutting this cord without resentment, only with the intention of release. As you do this, mentally affirm phrases like, I release this connection. I allow this person to follow their path just as I follow mine. Also, it's essential to fill the space that person once occupied in your mind with something new. Developing new habits, going deeper into self-discovery, and investing in your own journey are powerful ways to avoid getting stuck in emotional cycles that no longer serve you. When we cut ties with intention and awareness, we stop being hostages to the past and finally regain control over our energy and emotions. Even after deciding to emotionally detach from someone, it's common to feel moments of doubt, longing, or even a desire to reconnect. The mind starts making excuses. What if I'm overreacting? Maybe I should give it another chance. I just want to know how they're doing. These emotional relapses are part of the process, but it's essential to recognize that they are unconscious traps pulling us back into old patterns. Our brain is wired to seek comfort, and intense relationships create deep neural pathways that make us miss what once felt familiar. Just like someone trying to quit an addiction, that first impulse isn't a real desire for the other person. It's just a mental reflex searching for what it used to know. The key to avoiding relapses is to create conscious strategies to break the cycle. Every time you feel the urge to reach out, try the 30-minute rule. Before sending a message or checking up on them, wait 30 minutes and redirect your focus to another activity, a book, a walk, a hobby. Most of the time, the urgency fades, proving it was just a fleeting impulse. Another powerful method is the reality journal. Write down in detail all the reasons you chose to walk away. Whenever you feel like going back, reread those notes. When we're emotionally shaken, we tend to romanticize the past and forget the pain that made us want to leave. Having that clear, written reminder helps you stick to your decision. Also, pay attention to your emotional triggers. Moments of loneliness, stress, or low self-esteem can reactivate the urge to seek the other person. Anticipate those moments and have a plan for when they come. Create new routines, strengthen your support network, and remember, every time you resist a relapse, you're rewiring your brain to live free of that dependency. True healing happens when you realize you no longer need that person's presence to feel whole. The desire to go back might still come up, but over time, it loses strength until one day you simply notice that person no longer takes up space inside you. And at that moment, emotional detachment becomes final. One of the most powerful tools, and the one I connect with the most, is using silence as a tool for transformation. We live in a world where silence is often avoided. We're constantly surrounded by noise, notifications, conversations, endless distractions. But when we seek emotional distance from someone, silence becomes a powerful ally. It's not a void to be filled, it's a space for inner reconstruction. Jung believed that solitude and silence were essential for self-discovery. He said that anyone seeking answers within must learn to silence the external noise, and that includes, above all, the silence in relation to the person we're trying to distance ourselves from. Often, when we feel uncomfortable with silence, it's because it forces us to confront ourselves without distractions. Without the other person's presence, we're face to face with our deepest emotions. While that may feel uncomfortable at first, it's also the key to real transformation. Conscious solitude doesn't mean isolation. It means being with yourself fully, without needing validation from anyone else. Instead of seeing silence as punishment, we should view it as an invitation to strengthen our emotional independence. It's in that quiet space that we learn to listen to ourselves, understand our true needs, and break free from unconscious patterns keeping us stuck in the past. A powerful way to use silence as a healing tool is to set aside 30 minutes a day to be completely alone. No phone, no distractions, no other people, just you and your thoughts. At first, it might feel difficult, but with time, you'll begin to see the value in that space. Use that moment to ask yourself, who am I without this person? And notice the answers that arise. The absence of someone shouldn't be seen as a loss, but as an opportunity to rediscover yourself. When we learn to find peace in silence, we realize we were never truly alone. We've always had ourselves, and that in itself is more than enough to move forward with strength and freedom. So let's recap. Understanding emotional attachment is the first step to breaking free from it. You're not attached to the person, but to what they represent to you. Once you recognize these patterns, it's time to challenge the beliefs that keep that attachment alive. Replace them with healthier truths. My happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. I am whole on my own. Life moves on and new connections will come. The next step is to rebuild your identity without the other person. Invest time in yourself, rediscover your interests, strengthen your routine, and expand your social circle. It's also essential to cut emotional and energetic ties. Physical distance alone isn't enough. You have to break the internal connections still holding you to the past. Finally, avoid relapses. The urge to go back may come, but you don't have to act on it. Whenever you feel the need to reach out, wait 30 minutes, do something else. Most impulses fade when we don't feed the immediate need. And before you know it, you'll realize you don't miss them anymore. Emotional detachment can feel at first like a painful and even frightening process. When we walk away from someone we've deeply bonded with, it feels like leaving behind a part of our story, as if we're saying goodbye to a version of ourselves that only existed within that relationship. But what many don't realize is that, behind this apparent emptiness, something much greater is happening, a rebirth. Jung said that for something new to emerge, something old must die. This principle applies not just to physical life but to our emotional life as well. When we free ourselves from an attachment that limited us, we're not just ending a cycle, we're making space for something new to grow within us. But for that rebirth to happen, we must embrace the process of transformation, trust that every phase has its purpose, and understand that the pain of detachment is actually a sign of deep inner growth. At first, it might feel like nothing has changed. You may feel longing, your mind may keep revisiting memories. But gradually you'll start to notice something different. Your energy is no longer stuck in the past, the emotional weight begins to lift. You realize that your days continue as usual, that your identity is no longer tied to that person's presence, and what once felt essential is now just a memory. That's true rebirth. The discovery that you are bigger than any relationship you've ever had, that your life goes on, that you can create new meaning, discover new versions of yourself, and open up to experiences more aligned with your essence. The pain of attachment fades, and in its place emerges a new sense of freedom. Those who go through this process and allow themselves to move forward discover that real love is not a bond of dependency, but a state of internal wholeness. And when we learn to be enough for ourselves, relationships stop being a refuge and become a complement to a life that's already complete on its own. Emotional liberation isn't just about walking away from someone, it's about rediscovering yourself, redefining who you are, and growing stronger. It's about understanding that every end is really a new beginning. And when you understand that, you'll realize you were never really losing anything, you were making space for something greater. What once felt impossible now becomes clear. Emotional detachment isn't a punishment or a loss, it's a liberation. When we let go of the ties that kept us bound to someone, we're not just leaving a relationship behind, we're reclaiming the parts of ourselves we forgot along the way. And that inner reconnection is the real purpose of this journey. Jung teaches us that individuation, the path to becoming who we truly are, requires us to abandon the illusions of attachment and start seeing our relationships with more awareness. Genuine love should not be a refuge from loneliness nor an anchor holding us to the past. It should be a free choice where two people share life without needing to complete each other. Throughout this process, we learn that excessive attachment isn't about the other person, it's about us. We project our needs, place unrealistic expectations, and seek in others what we should be finding within. But once we realize that, we gain the power to change. Emotional detachment teaches us that our inner peace cannot depend on anyone else. Of course, this isn't an easy journey. It takes patience, courage, and above all, a genuine commitment to your own growth. There may be moments when longing creeps in, when old habits try to return. But the difference now is that you have the tools to handle it. You know you don't need to give in to the urge to go back because you understand that true freedom lies in moving forward. And when this transformation is complete, something amazing happens. What once felt indispensable loses its grip. You look back and realize there's no more pain, only growth. You see that relationship as a chapter in your story, but your journey continues, stronger, more conscious, and lighter. Now, here's an important question. Who have you become along this path? What have you discovered about yourself that you didn't see before? This journey wasn't just about letting someone go, it was about remembering who you really are. And that, more than anything else, is what truly matters. Because in the end, the greatest freedom we can achieve isn't being without someone, it's being whole, complete, and at peace, no matter who's by our side. The choice is in your hands. Applying what we've talked about here isn't just about forgetting someone, it's about finding yourself again. And the stronger you become, the less power that relationship has over you. When you realize that, you'll understand that the freedom you've been searching for was never in the other person, it was always inside you. If this video resonated with you, leave a comment below saying, "My freedom starts now," so I know you watched it until the end. And if you want to keep learning about self-awareness, psychology, and emotional freedom, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next video.